Hey everyone, welcome to California Haunts Radio tonight. We have a great show set up for you and a great guest set up for you as well. I just want to introduce myself. My name is Charlotte, and I am the leader of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation team. We're based out of Sacramento, but we do have 30 to 40 people spread out around the state of California and Washington, Oregon, and Hawaii, which makes it kind of cool. That way I can go to Hawaii 6 keys. Anyway, I just want to welcome you guys to the show tonight. It's a nice beautiful Wednesday day for California. Beautiful day. Got some yard work done and stuff, but like I said, I want to welcome you guys in. We're going to talk about a topic that's near and dear to my heart because I personally have had at least three experiences that I know of seeing like weird things in the sky, not to mention what I think might have been an abduction, because I had a loss of time, so we could talk to Tracie about that when she comes on. And Tracie has a history of seeing things in the sky, and she's taken and done a bunch of studying with it. And one of the topics that she has in her book that I find very unnerving is alien implants. That kind of freaks me out. So it would be kind of neat to talk to her about that as well. So without further ado, let's get into this and talk with Tracie, shall we? Hello.
Hi, Charlotte.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm good. I
Good.
love your accent.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm a Brit, as you can hear.
Yes. I have cousins in England, so yeah.
Oh, you do?
Yes, I have family there.
Great.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Well, let's see. I have had a background as a musician since I was about 8 years of age, and always knew as a kid that what I wanted to do was to be a professional concert pianist. And so I, asked my parents if I could have the piano lessons at the age of 8. They allowed me to do that. And I just fell in love with my instrument and saw it all the way through to the point where I first of all auditioned for the London College of Music and passed the audition, but could not actually get funding because it's a private school, and it's a school that is owned by Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
wow.
Andrew Lloyd Webber and Julian Lloyd Webber and their father. So I couldn't get funding. So at the very last minute, I had to audition at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, also in London. And thankfully, I got in there, passed the audition. I was there for about 4 years. So my life was to be a classically trained musician. That was my path, Charlotte, until one fine day in 1987, out of the crystal blue sky, I had my very first UFO encounter, sighting, which I'll never forget. And it's as if it kind of found me. I didn't find it. And I've always said that it found me. And it's been an ongoing journey ever since 1987.
Well, what happened to that first sighting?
Well, what I actually saw, my partner at the time, he was a musician too. He was a guitarist. And we were in the building where we were staying as students, which was in the Barbican area. Mm-hmm. And we're having a conversation, and it's just a normal, regular conversation. And there was a row of 9 windows. And it was about 2:00 in the afternoon. And I just look out the window as I'm, talking to him, and I see a very strange metallic object. And I knew it was metallic because of the way that the sunlight was glinting off it. It was kind of like, well, it wasn't kind of like, it was a cone-shaped object, pointed at the top, and it was rotated round at the bottom, and it was rotating as in an anti-clockwise motion as it was moving through the sky. And every time it turned, there must have been a darker part to the metal because that's where the sun didn't really hit it. So I don't know what that was. That dark part on the craft, but it was moving very slowly. And so I said to my partner at the time, what the bleep? What the hell is that?
Yeah.
And so he said to me, it's a UFO. I said, well, wait a second. What do you mean, a UFO? And he explained. And I said, okay, so you mean that this thing is being piloted by beings from somewhere else, another dimension, our galaxy or something? He said, absolutely. Now, he'd seen things as a kid, and I didn't think I did until I kind of explored a little further with it. And it turns out that, yeah, I had some interaction with beings and things like that. And so we watched it go out of view. And of course, I was telling everybody about it that night. I could not stay quiet. And the very next day, I can't remember where we were going, but we were going somewhere on the underground tube station in London. And we come out the other end, and there's a guy selling newspapers. And my partner said to me, oh my God, look, there's our UFO on the front page. Now, it wasn't a photo, but great big headlines. Something to the effect of UFO over the city of London. So we knew, Charlotte, then that we were not the only people that saw this thing. There were others. So that's how it all really unfolded and got started right there in the middle of London.
And then you had other sightings after that as well, right?
I did. Yes, I did. It all kind of stemmed from there. But I left London in about 1989, and I'd gone back to Staffordshire, where I lived, where I'm from, and I continued to see strange things there. A boomerang object, which again, broad daylight, and I was actually going to be teaching a student this particular day. And I got some time before my student arrived. And I thought, well, it's a lovely day. What should I do? So I decided I was going to read a book at one of the local wooded areas called Hanchurch Woods. It's a really well-known area. And so I get in my car and I go down to a local store so that I could take some goodies with me, some snacks. And I pull onto the car park, as we call it in the UK. And as I got out, we drive on I think we drive on the right side of the road. And we drive on the right side of the car, which is the right-hand side.
Yeah. You guys drive funny.
That's it. So we drive fun. So I got out the right-hand side. And as I did that, Charlotte, I had a feeling in my head telling me to look up. And as I did, there was the object to the right-hand side. There was this boomerang-shaped object. And boy, oh boy, doing the same thing as the cone that I'd initially seen in London. It was moving in an anti-clockwise motion. And it was very odd because it was very low over the rooftops of the houses. And I couldn't understand why it was so low. It was black, silent. And what it started to do as it was moving in an anti-clockwise motion is it shrunk itself down into a black sphere. And the black sphere kept moving around in a clockwise motion. And then it grew back up into a boomerang shape. And then it did the weirdest thing. It grew what I can only call an appendage out of the middle of it, which made the whole thing kind of look like an arrowhead sort of thing. And so a woman pulled up right next to me in a red car. She's getting her child out of the back seat. And I ran over to her and I said, I hope you don't think I'm crazy, but can you see this object up here in the sky? And she grabbed her child and she's sitting her child on her hip and she's looking up and she says, yes, I can see it. And I said, well, what do you think it is? And she said, I don't know. But then she said something very, very strange. It's always stuck with me. I don't know, but I don't think it's from here. Which I thought was a really weird statement. So I then saw someone else pulling onto the car park. It was a guy who owned the Chinese restaurant. So I ran over to him, said the same thing. Excuse me, hope you don't think I'm crazy, but can you see this object in the sky? He said he could. I said, well, what do you think it is? And he said, is it not a hang glider? And I said, well, where is the person hanging from this hang glider?
Right.
There's no person there. Plus, this thing was big. It wasn't the size of a hang glider. It was huge. So he said to me, well, that's a good point, that there is no person. And he didn't know how to answer it. He didn't know what to say. So I never actually went into the store and took any snacks with me. I just jumped in my car and I thought, I think it's heading to Hanchurch Woods. So drove to Hanchurch Woods and I put the windows down on the car because it was a lovely day. And I waited for this thing to come over and never did. I waited a good 30, 35, 40 minutes. It never came over. So I then drove back home and prepared my room ready to teach. And just as I'm walking past the window, which was a great big bay window, the object flies over my house, over to the rooftop of it's a single-story home, which was across the road. We call them bungalows in England. So it flew over the rooftop of this bungalow and stopped and just did this clockwise or anti-clockwise movement again. And I thought, what in the world is this? So after a while, it took off. My student came. I told the child's mother what I'd just seen that day. And I said, you might see it moving down, driving down the road. You might see it. Just let me know when you come to pick her up. Anyway, as it turns out, she never did see the craft. What was weird about it was I'd had that sighting on the Tuesday, and it was actually a month before I was to host my first UFO conference in my little town of Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire, at one of the local museums. And I wanted to put on a UFO conference, Charlotte, because I wanted to find out back in 1996 what the general public felt about this subject. Were people as interested in this phenomena as I was? So I was kind of putting the feelers out there with a conference. Well, I sold it out. There was 250 seats. I sold out. I think I had to turn about 100 people away. We had no room for them. But regarding that sighting, I called a local UFO group, friends of mine, a guy who ran the group named Gary Cartledge. And I called Gary and I said, Gary, I don't know what I've seen today, but I have to describe it and tell you what I saw. So he said, well, okay. I explained. He says, okay, leave it with me. I'll check with the Civil Aviation Authority and I'll see what they have to say. So he got back to me on the Saturday morning of that week. And he said, okay, I've checked with the Civil Aviation Authority. They did not see anything on radar, but that doesn't mean to say that the object wasn't there. Because as we all know, these objects can cloak themselves. There's such thing as invisibility, to things like radar. So they, all we know was it was not tracked on radar. He said, but I did have a very interesting message left on my answer machine yesterday, which was Friday. A gentleman called me and said, I don't want to leave my name. I don't particularly believe in UFOs, but I just want to tell you what I've seen today. I've seen 3 black boomerang objects flying in formation over my house.
Wow.
And the gentleman lived about 9 miles away from where I lived. So I found that really, really awesome that someone else had experienced what I had seen. I'd only seen 1, he'd seen 3. But nevertheless, I mean, something was definitely going on in that area. What? I don't know. But very strange.
You were saying earlier about later on you realized that you've been seeing them all your life.
Not craft, just had very strange things. It's like, for example, I've always been very intuitive. As a kid, very intuitive. Knew things that were going to happen, or let's say at 3 years of age, I always knew I was never going to have children. I was never going to be a mother. Not because I can't be a mother, for whatever health reasons, or nothing like that. It just wasn't my path. there was a bigger path for me. So I always knew I would never have children. Teaching my students and just knowing what they'd done that day before they'd come to have tuition with me. And I would rattle off what they'd done and, if they'd gone shopping, what they had bought. And they were gobsmacked. They were dumbfounded. How did you know this? And I said, well, I don't know. I just know it. So just weird things like that. And I lived, we lived with my grandma until I was about 14 years of age. And when she passed, I felt her sit at the end of my bed. I attain it to her because that's who we lived with until I was 14. And then we totally moved into a new house. But just weird things like that. I never had an imaginary friend as such, like a lot of kids have, but something similar to that. And I had forgotten all about it, Charlotte, until I went to a UFO conference in Laughlin in 1997. And I met with, was it 90? Yes, 1997. And I met with Mary Rodwell, who lives in Australia. Obviously, she's at the forefront of the UFO alien phenomena. And I had some healing from her. And she said to me, as she was giving me some healing, I have a little grey being here. And he's quite upset. And he's upset because he says, you don't remember him. But he used to come to you when you were a child, about 7 years of age. She says, and he's the cutest looking little ET I've ever seen, but he's upset because you don't remember him. And then I started to get flashbacks with certain things. And then I remembered, I cannot remember physically seeing him. I don't remember. I do remember talking to something. And so things that I never thought happened did. And then, like I said, I was with music all my life, which was really my main thing. And then it all just changed in 1987. So, and I've seen many since. And the boomerang object thing, I don't know how the BBC heard about it in England. BBC Digital, they heard about the sighting and they contacted me and they said, we're putting together a documentary it's called Over the Moon. And it's going to be part of a documentary just before Patrick Moore's astronomy show. And it'll all kind of coincide and tie in. And we'd like to come up and we'd like to do a reenactment of your sighting. So we did the reenactment for the BBC Digital. And that was great and fine. And then I moved to California in 2001 and continued to have amazing sightings there also.
Interesting. I'm thinking my stuff started when I was young because I remember, I don't know if my sister remembers this, she's online with us, but we were waiting for my brother to get off work in a car, and I remember looking up, and I don't know, there was a bright light. I don't think it was the moon. It could have been the moon if I was a kid, but it was a very bright light that was just hanging in the sky and then disappeared. And then later on, when I hit my teens, one night I was looking out the front door and I could see this thing that was cigar shaped, but it had lights on it that rotated.
Wow. And
at first I thought it might be the Goodyear blimp, and I'm thinking, well, maybe that's what it is. But it was there for like 3 hours and then disappeared.
Really? 3
and then
hours?
Once when I was an adult, I was driving home late one night and it was a cloudy night. And I was coming across, I was coming into the city of Sacramento across a bridge, and I looked up and I saw just the clouds light up. And after they lit up, something went straight up. This is like 3 a.m. Something went straight up in the air. Wow. So I have had weird encounters. My friend Marisa, who's on here, and I were driving out to a movie in another city. And as we were driving down the highway, I noticed that things started to change. Like there was like a weird warping thing. And when I was looking up at the bridges, I could see that there were like vines on the bridges and stuff, like it was when I was a little kid. It was really strange. And then an hour later, we ended up like 30 miles away.
Oh my God. And you had missing time. Yeah.
We still don't know what happened.
Wow.
So it's why I wanted to talk to you. So yeah, it was great to have you on tonight because it's kind of fun to talk to somebody that
Well,
understands that stuff.
thank you for having me.
That's no problem. It was just great. I'm glad you came on. Let's talk about stuff like that. I mean, obviously, you've seen them quite a few times. I mean, I've obviously had encounters or whatever. There's probably, like you say, you never had kids. I was just thinking about that too. You probably have kids and you don't realize it.
Well,
okay? It's like me. I probably have them and I don't realize it. And they're like way up circling the earth somewhere.
That's right. I've always felt that I had a child that wasn't from here, and it was a male. Yeah. And I remember when I started my TV show in California in 2002, I had done a show with a psychic named Robin Alexis, who lives in California. And I had a reading with Robin, and initially it was over the phone. And she said to me, "You have a child that's not from here. But I'm being told by the great diva of the universe, or whatever it was, that it was a female." And I said, "No, I know it's male." And then she corrected me and said she had just been corrected. She had just been corrected by this source. And I was actually correct. It was a male. So I have no evidence of that.
Right.
I don't know. It's only what I feel.
Sure. That's how I feel too. I think there's probably, my friend and I always make a joke out of it, but one day I'm gonna be walking down the street and see these big, they describe these big, this big guy with the big forehead coming towards me that looks like a little like me,
Yeah. Mama.
Freaky, wouldn't it?
I found you.
If it looks like Gorgu, I'm okay with it, right? That's what we want. Is something that looks like Gorgu.
Right.
That's cute. How can you resist that, right?
Very cute. Yeah. Very cute.
That brings me back to what I wanted to lead into was that, okay, you've seen these things pretty much all your life. I've seen stuff pretty much all my life. What about tracking devices? When they insert the possibility of the reason why certain people see more of this stuff than others would be that they know where we're at. So there would be something inserted into our bodies.
Right. That's a very good point. And it's a good subject as a branch of UFO abductions, obviously. My very dear friend, the late Dr. Roger Lear, I met in England in 1999. And we immediately became great friends. And I stayed in touch with Roger until I moved out to California, and then I could see Roger more frequently. Back in 2003, because he lived in Thousand Oaks, and I lived I've lived all over. I've lived in Santa Clarita, Studio City, Agora Hills, Canyon Country. But he was in Thousand Oaks. And we had many conversations about this, because anybody that follows this subject knows that Dr. Roger Lear was a pioneer in removing these alleged alien implants. So one day, he had a lady who was an airline stewardess who had worked for Southwest Airlines contact him. And she told him the story of what she had experienced happened to her and her boyfriend. And he invited me along to the surgery to actually remove this object. And my ex-husband, well, he was my husband at the time, now an ex-husband, but my husband at the time was filming it for the purpose of Roger to use at conferences so he could show the surgery. And I was just there for moral support for her and just watching what was going on. And I could get the story firsthand from her. So as it transpired, and I'm going the long way around of answering you, because they're not tracking devices. So she had this thing in her forearm, and she told me the story that she was in some hotel room with her boyfriend at the time. And this was some 20 years prior to meeting Roger and all the rest of it. But she and her boyfriend were told to go to the window telepathically. They didn't know why. They see a disc with flashing lights all the way around it. And she said, we stood looking at this thing and we didn't know why we were looking at this thing. We knew what we saw. We didn't know quite where it had come from. But then all of a sudden, this big ball of blue light passed through the closed window and it entered into the hotel room. She says, and it just wandered around the hotel room and we watched it. And the next thing we know, morning. We wake up, we start a regular conversation. And she says, I said, wait a minute. Do you remember what happened to us last night? Because we were told to go to the window. We saw the disc, like a saucer shape, classical saucer shape object with lights all around it. And then we see this blue light that comes into our room. And then what? What happened to us?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was very afraid. He was very, very scared of what potentially could have happened, but he did remember it and he was terrified by it. He didn't want to talk about it. He didn't want to think about it. She says, in fact, that was the very last day I ever saw him again in my entire life. He wouldn't return text messages. He wouldn't call me, nothing. That was it. That was the end of the relationship. But she was in the shower that morning and she says, I was just showering myself and I go to my arms and I feel this lump in my right forearm. And I think, wow, that's weird. I did not have that yesterday. So she keeps it in her arm for some 20 years.
Wow.
Never causes her any pain, nothing. Doesn't grow, just remains the same. But she can push it. That's the weird thing. She could push it around her forearm. So unbelievable. So she sees my friend, Dr. Roger Lear, on a TV show about UFOs and abductions and implants. And she puts 2 and 2 together and makes 4 and thinks, I wonder if that's what I have, this implant thing. So she tracks Roger down. They have a meeting, which he does with all of the abductees. He puts them through certain tests, sanity tests, make sure they are, they're sane. And then comes to the x-rays and all the rest of it. And the question, well, do you want it removed? And they typically do. She did. And she says, oh, without a shadow of a doubt, I want it removed. So the day came, we were all there. And there was Dr. Roger Lear and there was another surgeon there. And they cut open the flesh of her forearm and they sort of, made it like a tent and they lifted the skin up like this. They went in with the forceps. And as they go in with this thing, as they go in to get this thing, it moves all the way up her arm. It shoots up her arm.
Wow.
So it's kind of like got its own intelligence about it.
Right.
So they have to cut the skin further and lift it higher than normal and go right in and get this thing and grab it. And they get it. First of all, one of the tests had said that this was not metallic. It did not show up metallic. And Roger said, well, whatever this thing is, it's not a cyst because you can actually move this thing around your arm. Mm-hmm. It would only be a cyst if it was attached to tissue, and it's not attached to tissue. So when it came out, it was the most weirdest thing I'd ever seen. It was like it was creamy yellow in color. It was in 2 halves, and it was like a clam. And it had a black strip that ran right down the middle of it. And what Roger typically did was to take a little vial and he would put the implant in the vial in the person's own body fluids, and he would refrigerate it overnight for about 24 to 48 hours to see if there was any change. Mm-hmm. And anyway, she ended up saying, just like everyone else when these things are removed, that she very weirdly felt that she had a whole new sense of freedom, which is a very odd statement to make. So I wrote the book in 2012, Alien Encounters in the Western United States, and I had Dr. Roger Lear write a chapter in there about alien implants, and he called it Fact or Fiction. And he said when he first was introduced to the subject with 2 people from the United States in different parts of the United States that were presented to him by researchers, he said, I've taken everything out of the human body. I've taken hair, glass, plastic, you name it. Metal, I've taken it out. He said, I was expecting to just think, oh, it's just going to be something regular that just got lodged into the skin and that's it. He said, but no, when I opened up these two people's bodies where these objects were, he said they were exactly identical. They were metallic and they were delta shaped.
Wow. Okay.
They were delta shaped. And he said, I then went from this skeptical person to a believer that something was going on and the fact that people had seen things. He said, but these were not tracking devices because, as he later spoke with a abductee in Brazil, who her and her mother had been taken, they both got implants in their great toe of their left foot, I think it was. The mother had 2 implants. She had since passed, but she had 2 implants in her great toe, left great toe, and so did her daughter. And she said how she did not want them removed. She felt that something bad was going to happen if she had them removed. But said she was taken on board the ship and she was told by these beings, we want you to look at the screen. She says, and on the screen was a bug. And they showed this bug flying around in the air and they froze it with some kind of beam on it. And they told this woman in Brazil, you see that bug on the screen? We can actually find that bug anywhere on the planet. Anywhere, because it's got its own genetic code, if you like. Okay. So we can find it anywhere. So this is kind of what made Roger then think, well, these can't be tracking devices because if you've been taken, your mother's been taken and your mother's been taken. So what they're doing is they're following family lineage. And they're looking for, Charlotte, a certain characteristic in your DNA. And if you don't have this certain characteristic, they don't want you. And we don't know what this characteristic is. But he went on to say that, yes, he went from a skeptic to a believer. They are not tracking devices. They are monitoring your bodily functions.
Okay. Makes sense.
And for this certain characteristic. And a lot of abductees, he would check their blood type. Well, what blood type are you? A lot of people would say, well, I'm Rh negative. I'm rhesus negative. Which seemed to be a blood type that would show up over and over and over and over again because it's a universal blood type. Not to say, even in my research, I was finding people that had A positive, like myself, or A and B positive, or O positive, or whatever. Yeah, other people are taken with different blood types, but we found that the rhesus negative seemed to be of a higher percentage.
See, I wonder now, because with the whole, the bodily function thing, because I have talked, in the past, I've interviewed people on here who have been star children, allegedly star children, and like they say, they'll go up and supposedly get impregnated, by the alien to carry the child. And this would be a way that they could monitor what was going on with the child and get it out without anybody knowing, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, these things are going on. I mean, people are suddenly women are suddenly becoming implanted with a fetus, realize that they're pregnant. They're not getting their monthly menstrual cycle. What happened? They go to the doctor, you're pregnant. Well, I can't be because I've had no sexual, there's nothing, I've not been intimate with anybody. So how can I be pregnant? Are you sure you have the right person's information? And it turns out, yes, they are. And then they wait so many, I think it's between 6 to 8 weeks. And then they are re-abducted and the fetus is taken.
Look at the fetus, yeah.
Right.
Get it out of there.
Right.
Or they're monitoring our health just to see, because if they are cross mixing with us, they want to get a good idea of what our bodies are doing.
Right.
Maybe that's another issue with it too.
Exactly. And in fact, on that very front cover that I sent you of the book I wrote, Alien Encounters in the Western United States, that front cover is based on an actual scenario of a abductee who I interviewed in England at the time. I call her Roxanne in the book. But that was a drawing there of her on board the ship. on a table, surrounded by grey ETs who brought a child, a hybrid child to her. And they were telling her, you need to hold this child and you need to breastfeed it. You need to love it and feed it. And she says, Tracie, I jumped off that table so fast. And I put my hands straight out to them and I said, no, 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 do not come anywhere near me with that child, because that child is not my child.
Right.
So she talked about that, being taken over and over and over. And she was in her 20s. So she was young.
An abduction that comes to mind, you've probably heard of it. I can't, off the top of my head, I don't know. Can't remember who the people were. It happened in the Mojave. It was a couple that was camping. And they were abducted. I think it was up in the Mojave or up in Death Valley. And they were abducted out the back of their pickup. And out of all the books I've read, that has to be the scariest abduction book I have ever read in my life. Because this is really reality hit me, that they would come back after you, the way they talked about. Because, ghost hunting, we're chasing shadows and whatnot. And what got me with this book was that when they would see these aliens come to get them, they were walking through walls.
Oh boy, yeah.
Like the walls didn't exist. And that got me to thinking about maybe these ghosts that we're hunting aren't really ghosts. Maybe it's aliens. Well,
and this is the kind of thing they do, because I also remember Roger specifically talking about a case he was investigating of he was a fireman at the time. And he said these things would come out of the wall. Mm-hmm. And so what he did, he got a little tiny camera, mm-hmm. and he popped it inside of his alarm clock by the side of his bed so that he could film these things coming out of the wall. And lo and behold, he got it. And he caught this thing halfway coming out of the wall. It was bluish gray in color. Mm-hmm. And it looked like it had some kind of bumps to the head as it was halfway through the wall. And it also got the footprint of this thing too, because he very craftily, very cunningly put a mat by the side of the bed, and underneath was a little bit like, I don't know how to say it, a little bit like, what can I say? Like rubber, mm-hmm. Like a plaster Paris thing with tinfoil over it, and the mat over that. So when they're being stepped on it, there was the imprint. There was the footprint. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what happened to that case, in all honesty, but I do remember having a conversation. He had a conversation with me about that and what happened.
Yeah. That was the first time I ever read about that, and that made me wonder about like the ghost hunting that we do, even the EVPs, because when we get them, the voices are always distorted. When you get your EVP, so it makes you wonder if it's not coming from another dimension with an alien coming. That it's not. Instead of chasing ghosts, we're chasing aliens, and we don't realize it.
That could be true, but let me tell you, I have some experience with some EVPs, because I lost my dad in November of 2017. My dad comes to visit me. Okay. Every single month. And nice. I've heard and it's brilliant. He switches the light on in my guest bedroom. And it's been going on since April of 2018, non-stop, and it's fantastic. And I write about it in my recent book about near-death experiences. I Survived Beyond and Back. Not that my dad had a near-death experience. He had a full transition to the other side. Mm-hmm. But I've had EVPs from my dad on my cell phone. And I have a friend in Arizona who is a paranormal investigations team, like yourself, Entity Voices, Tony and Sherry Rathman. And he built a device called the Evox. Okay. And he's done experiments to try and reach my dad. And I played the EVP for the first time on my show a few weeks ago on the Tracie Austin show, and never played it publicly before, but I decided I wanted to do it. And Tony I'd sent Tony a photograph of me and my dad, just so he could see what my dad looked like. And he said, he switched on the Evox, and all these spirits kind of flocked to the box. They all want to say hello, and they always address him by name. Hello, Tony, or hi, Tony. It's the most amazing thing. Uh-huh. And he says, I'm looking for a certain gentleman. If you spirits don't mind stepping aside, because I'm looking for a certain gentleman of the name of Dan Austin. And Dan, if you can hear me, I'm a very good friend of your daughter's. And she would like to talk to you. She would like to hear a message from you. And if you can hear me, and if you can see me, I'm holding up a photograph. And I'd like you to tell me who's in this photograph. And you should recognize who's in this photograph, because one of these people is you. Who is the other person? Charlotte, you hear very clearly, crystal clear, my dad saying, that's me daughter.
Nice.
And I was blown away.
How nice.
And you see, where I'm from in England, in Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire, that's how we talk when we say,
Right.
It's slang, me for my.
Right.
A little
Right.
bit like the Irish or the Scottish,
Sure,
you know.
sure.
That's me car, that's me mum, that's me
What
dad.
a wonderful story. That's wonderful.
Oh, it's incredible. It's incredible. And I've had EVPs from dad saying, I won't leave you. He won't leave me, and other things. Me, you can hear me talking on my cell phone, looking up at the light and saying, once he switched it on, I hope you're okay over there, Dad, and everything's going okay. And you can hear my dad saying, I'm all right. It's a whisper because my dad was a quiet man, but you can hear him say, I'm all right. And it's the way the T is at the end of all right that I know that's me dad. See, I just said it. That's me dad.
That's really cool. I've had, since my mother died 2 years ago in May, I've had some experiences with her too, but I'm not brave enough to do an EVP yet. I don't know if I'm ready to hear her voice from wherever she's at, but I know she's around here. There's just little things that she used to do that she still does.
Right.
Stuff like that.
Do you know, in 2000, I keep forgetting what year we're in, 2019, the psychic medium John Edward came to Las Vegas. He came to Red Rock, and he came 3 straight days in a row. And I went to see him on 2 of the 3 days. And he said to me, the easiest way to connect with a loved one in spirit is to write them a letter, because they do see it and they do read it.
That's
Well,
interesting.
it was amazing. And
I've never heard that.
yeah. And it's the first time I'd heard it, Charlotte. So, of course, me being me, I had to put it to the test.
Right.
I had a journal on my desk that I bought years and years and years ago. I think it was like 2012. And it was such a beautiful journal. I didn't want to just write any old thing in it. So I thought, it suddenly sprung to mind when John said this. I thought, oh my God, I can use that journal for my dad. I tried it 2 days after seeing John. Bam, it worked. Within a 24-hour window, my dad acknowledged that I'd written that letter and I'd read it, because he switched the light on. And like John said, you write your letter as normal, as if they were still living, and that what's going on in your life, even though they already know what's going on in your life, because
Right.
they're able to see further ahead than we can. But just have a regular conversation, ask for a sign in the letter, and just be patient, because it can take time. With me, it happened pretty quick. I was very fortunate. But I would probably urge you to do that first.
I'm going to try that. Yeah.
Try it before an EVP.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm ready to hear her voice, but I'm going to try. I'm actually going to try that. But like I say, people think I'm nuts. Some people in my family too, I think I'm nuts, but she is here. She's still around. She's still watching over me, keeping an eye on things. I have a question. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's very emotional. I totally understand where you're coming from, Charlotte, because when I heard my dad say, that's me daughter, that's the first time I'd heard my dad speak since the very last week of being with him before he passed when I was in England. So it's emotional, and a whole flurry of emotions go through your head. You don't quite know what to think and how to handle it. So it takes a moment. Yeah.
Yeah. I have a question from the chat room for you, from Jerry Edwards. He'd like to know what you think of the Skinwalker Ranch.
Well, hi there, Jerry, and thanks for your question. That is, I hear so many stories coming from that place. I would love to go on an investigation to Skinwalker Ranch. I have had the person that used to own it, and I can't remember his name, he sent me photographs of what he'd captured, and some were greys that were coming right up to the camera, and a ship above the ranch itself.
Mm-hmm.
And there was just a couple of photographs there that he'd sent to me. So I took it on face value because he lived there. They don't look to me like they're hoaxed. And then I know Bob Bigelow, who lives out here in Las Vegas, where I'm at. He bought the ranch and then he's since sold it. And I would love to go down there with maybe, you know, Tony and Sherry Rathman from Entity Voices with that Evox and see what we can pick up and do some investigations. Yes. So very weird phenomena there. Very weird
strange,
phenomena.
Very strange.
There's got to be a portal or something around
There's
it.
something going on there. Yeah, there's definitely something. Another question I had was, I'm sorry about the dog. She's sleeping away.
Oh, that's okay. I'm a big animal lover. I have cats,
she has to be in here when I'm working, so it is what it is.
That's cute. That's very cute.
If somebody thinks that they might have been abducted, what kind of signs can they look for on their bodies?
Well, on Sunday, just past, I interviewed an abductee who wrote a book called Abducted and Furious. Her name's Lisa O'Hara. And in it, she writes about certain tools, the methods that she's put in place to try and stop these abductions. So if any of your listeners are curious to know more or are having some signs of being taken, I suggest you probably read that book because it may be of interest to you. It's on Amazon. She sent me photographs, and we showed the photographs of bruising on the body that would just appear overnight or whatever. And I mean, really bad bruises. But the weird thing about it, Charlotte, was they weren't sore. There was no pain to them. She goes, I don't understand that, why there's no pain. There was other impressions like two dots, a certain proportion apart, where it's like a stun gun was placed on her body. And she said they would they'd eventually turn into freckles, which was very, very strange. But she never felt any soreness. And she talks about she's actually being visited and taken by these praying mantis type beings, which it's like, oh my God. You know, I mean, it's bad enough when you think about a grey, but a praying mantis.
Yeah.
So she saw signs, first of all, and then she talked about driving down a road in her car and being abducted while she's driving.
Okay, I can believe that.
I said, oh my God, Lisa, what happened? She goes, I don't know. I just start to hear something in my head. The car's still driving, but it's like I'm not there. And her husband has actually witnessed this and experienced this happening.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very, very strange. And I've only known, well, I haven't known any other abductee driving and being abducted, but in my book, Alien Encounters in the Western United States, there's a story in there. I call him John in the book. He's a scientist and his whole family have been taken. And he remembers being told to pull over to the side of the road by these grey entities. And he says, Tracie, I physically watched my wife slip out of her seatbelt and go up through the roof of the vehicle into the craft above the car. And when she was brought back, she came in the same way that she left.
Wow.
And it's just unbelievable to me. It's just so unbelievable that something can manipulate your surroundings and time to do this kind of thing.
That's
what
crazy.
are we dealing with here?
Yeah.
A lot of people keep saying they're demons, they're demonic. And I'm saying, well, okay, that's a fair point. But tell me this, why does a demon need to come in a spaceship? Unless it's part of the big plan, the big deceit, disguising themselves as ETs.
Right.
How would we know? How do we know?
We don't. Do you think there are some areas that are more prone to this than others?
Yes, I do. You're talking of certain areas or certain people?
Certain areas.
Oh, certain areas. Yeah, I do. There are certain areas. I mean, well, like you've mentioned, Skinwalker Ranch. There are certain areas out here in Las Vegas where I have seen on a few occasions silver spheres, just silver spheres. Certain areas of California. When I had my TV show back in California, back in the day, 2002 to 2006, I had Preston Dennett on my show. We talked about UFOs over Topanga Canyon. He'd written a book about it. Topanga Canyon is a big hotspot. So there are certain spots, hotspots all over the place for this kind of phenomena. And I mean, Mexico City, flotillas of craft have been seen. And Jaime Maussan, who I've known a number of years, is a journalist there. And he has that, I'm not sure, I don't know if he still has it. He could well still have the show called Terza Millennio. And he covers this subject on a weekly basis. And I've seen footage from him with about 500 UFOs over the city, Mexico City. So what are we dealing with? I mean, we keep waiting for some kind of disclosure. People keep saying, well, we're getting close to it. We're getting close to the disclosure. But this has been talked about for years and it never happens. But do we really need disclosure? Because do we need our new president to stand up and say, yes, we've been visited, and yes, we've been visited for a very long time, and this is the truth, and this is what's happening? Do we really need that? Because is disclosure not already here?
True. I have read. I've been talking with some people from MUFON, about that when you talk about disclosure, where we don't realize it, but a lot of them are among us already anyway, but we don't know it.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing over and over and over. Actually, who was it now? I'm just trying to think of his name. Major Bob Dean, who used to live in Arizona. Wonderful, wonderful man. He passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. He had at many conferences that he'd spoken at, and I'd seen him talk at a couple of conferences. He said, back in the day when he was with SHAPE headquarters in Paris, he got to see a top secret document. He was allowed to go into a room. He could not take a pen. He could not take any paper. So basically he had to memorize what he was reading in this document. And back then he said there were like 52 alien races coming here. He said, one of which looked like we do. They're very human looking, he said, and you could put them on a bus, you could put them in a taxi cab, they could walk down the street, you could see them in the grocery store, and you would never, ever know. He said, in fact, it was freaking some of the generals out at the Pentagon when they were walking down the corridors of the Pentagon. Because at first the generals didn't know who they were until it was pointed out to them that these were actually extraterrestrial beings. But you'd never know. He said you'd never know. They just look like we do.
This brings me back to another thing I was thinking. Those are obviously hybrids. I mean, yes. They're obviously from our DNA, from these abduction, pregnancy things. It makes you wonder if that's if we're the thing that they want to look like. They don't want to look alien anymore. They would rather look like us. It's just more pleasing. That's why you're getting these praying mantis aliens that are capturing women too.
Right.
Or maybe they're trying to do the hybrid so that we're the high standard essentially.
Right, and I can kind of agree with that. But I did a show a long time ago, again when I had that show in California, that TV show with Dr. Frank Stranges, the late Dr. Frank Stranges, who wrote a book called Stranger at the Pentagon, and it's a fantastic book. And a dear friend of mine, Craig Campobasso, who's a casting director in LA, put together a movie called Stranger at the Pentagon based on Dr. Frank Strange's book. And it's a great movie. I would suggest people have a look at it online. And he's put a portion in there of me interviewing Dr. Frank Stranges about this man called Valiant Thor, who was from Venus. And he stayed at the Pentagon for, I think it was 3 years. And there are pictures of Val Thor in the book, Stranger at the Pentagon. And he looks like a typical human man. You would never, ever suspect anything different. And Dr. Frank said he got to talk with Valiant Thor personally. He says this man had no fingerprints. The ends of his fingers were like boiled eggs. They were so smooth. He said, and another thing about Valiant Thor was he had no navel. This, he said, is obviously because he was a created being. He was a created being. So, and apparently he came from the planet Venus.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I can't find any fault to the story. I can't find anything that's dodgy with it.
Wow, imagine that. The Venus is so hot.
Yeah, and he said Valiant Thor used to park his ship in Lake Mead here in Las Vegas, up by in Henderson, by the Lakes of Las Vegas, Lake Las Vegas. You know, Lake Mead is right next door. He says, and you'd never know because the ship was invisible. He said, but you knew when it was going to take off because of all the leaves and things that would blow from the craft, blowing outward, or when it was landing. And of course, we lost Dr. Frank Stranges a few years ago. And so, I mean, I don't know if anyone else is, you know, at the forefront of this thing with Val Thor. If they could tell us if the ship is still parked there, if Val Thor comes and goes back and forth from Venus to Earth, don't know. It's just a very interesting story, and I can't really find any fault with it.
Interesting. Man, this is fun. This is fun tonight.
Very.
I have a friend who was on the show earlier in the season, and he used to communicate with an alien called Mu, M-O-U. And I forget what planet the alien was from, but he told them a lot about what was going on. And they designed a Ouija board, but it was a customized Ouija board that he would communicate with him with.
Really?
His name is Barry. I'll get you a link to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you'd be interested to hear me say about some of the stuff that Moo said, you know, and how they celebrate. They still celebrate the holidays like we do and all this other stuff. It's just
really,
yeah. It's interesting to hear what
Very.
Moo said. What do you attribute? Okay, maybe it's because we're all more observant now, or people are more braver to say something that they've seen these things or been abducted. What do you attribute the sudden rise in people coming forward?
The sudden rise in people coming forward. Well, I think it's mainly, I should say, what you've just said actually there, Charlotte, that more and more people, skeptics in particular, are seeing things now for the first time that they poo-pooed years ago and thought, you know, this is a load of hogwash. There's nothing to all of this, you know. So I think that more and more people are being awakened to sightings of things that they cannot explain, that do not make sense, and craft that defy all logic. Everything that we have been taught seems to be wrong. It seems to be incorrect. So I think more and more people are coming out of the woodwork because there is an awakening because of that very thing. They're seeing more and more things in the skies that our military cannot control our skies.
I was going to say, because my next question was, do you think that the government knows more than they're telling us?
I'm on the fence about this, really, because part of me wants to say, yes, I think they do know more than what they are telling us. But then part of me thinks they don't quite know everything. That's why they've tried to back engineer craft at Area 51. And I used to see the Janet airplanes, and you can still see the Janet airplanes out here, you know, the white plane with the red stripe going down the middle. You know, when I had a car with the sunroof, I would be looking right up and seeing the plane go right over my sunroof. And you know where it's come from with those workers there. So, yeah, I mean, we've heard these stories from Bob Lazar that they've tried to back engineer 9 craft in particular. Who knows what's going on out there today?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Area 51 has anything there. I feel more like it's gone to Wright-Patterson.
That makes
to
sense.
be honest. Yeah. So I think that's just some kind of, just some kind of stage thing at Area 51 to try and attract people. And I was part of a show 2 Septembers ago for a certain network. I think it was the CB network, I think it was. We went out to Area 51 and they filmed us, when they were storming Area 51.
Right.
We did an episode before the storming happened, and they thought all this information was going to come out. Nothing came out.
Mm-hmm.
And the producer told us to drive in our Jeeps up to a certain gate, and then he said, don't face the gate straight on. You've got to turn the vehicle around as if you're going to do a U-turn. And he said, I want you just to go to the second bush and just do a U-turn as if you're going to turn back. And he said, and are you okay with getting out the car? And myself and Ryan Sprague, who was part of the show series, we said, okay, we got out the car and we looked around, and it had started to rain, and nobody came for us. Nobody said anything. We didn't walk towards the gate. We didn't cause any commotion. In fact, when we were driving up, we felt that we drove over something, and we heard a snap of something. And Ryan said, oh my God, what if they are listening to us right now? I said, well, if they are listening to us right now, I just want to tell you, we're not meaning you any problems tonight. We just want to come out to Area 51 to this gate and just see what's going on, because I've never been out to Area 51 before. It was the first time. So no harm came. And it's great being part of that TV show. The CW channel, that's it, the CW channel. So it's great being part of that. But I think, Charlotte, to be honest, I think more stuff is out at Wright-Patterson than Area 51.
Well, maybe, like you say, if it is focused more at Wright-Patterson, which, by the way, is where Project Blue Book was based out of anyway.
Right.
If it is based at Wright-Patterson, then maybe they're using Area 51 as a distraction for everybody, so nobody goes and hangs out at Wright-Patterson to poke around. Right.
I agree with that too. That could be a good possibility. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. This was a great show. Oh my God.
Well, thank you.
I learned so much. It was so fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you for inviting me.
And I would love to have you on again at some point.
Definitely come back whenever you're ready. Just give me a shout.
Sounds good. Can you tell everybody how to find you, about your show, and your books and everything? And
absolutely, yeah. I have my show with KGRA on a Sunday night. They're typically live shows, and they're online virtual podcast shows. And then, so you can either see them at KGRA. db.com, or you can go to the Tracie Austin show on YouTube and you can see the shows there. Or sometimes we just do the regular radio shows as well that you can still hear through KGRA radio. And the books you can actually find on Amazon. The latest book, I Survived Beyond and Back, which is about true near-death experiences. I've taken it down because I'm just making some publishing changes. So over the next few weeks, that should be back up. So you could find it there. And the TracieAustinShow.com is part of my website too.
Fantastic. Again, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. And I'm going to have you on again if you want to come back on, because
I would love to.
So much fun talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a good rest of the evening.
You too. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Okay, guys, that was Tracie Austin. That was pretty fun talking alien stuff with her. I want to let you guys know that I'm going to be creating a calendar. I have bookings for the show all the way through the end of March, and Facebook kind of limits me to being able to post, like, how I put these things out ahead of time. It's limiting me to like 7 days, and so it's kind of hindering that. And I think I'd like to give you guys more notice on who's going to be coming on an upcoming show. So I'm going to go ahead and create some kind of calendar in Photoshop to do that for you. So that way you can plan on deciding which shows you want to see and which shows you don't. Now, that being said, if you like my show, share it. Let your friends know, because we want to build this thing up and make it into a really big show, as they say. Or even if you didn't like the show, share it. Share it with your enemies. Get them to come on and take a look at it. As you can see, I have a banner thing flipping across the bottom. We are a nonprofit team, so we only make money via donations. And so all this stuff I do comes out of my own pocket. And it would be great, maybe if you can find it in your heart at some point to donate, even if it's $3, $5, whatever. That would be great to help support this stuff. I do pay for StreamYard, and I pay for my internet as well to do this, and it helps us buy equipment and whatnot. So that would be great too. But I want to thank you guys for coming. And Monday, get ready for this. Anybody that drinks Coca-Cola? Is there anybody that drinks Coca-Cola? I'm sure there is, because I've got a gentleman coming on Monday who is going to talk about the history of Coca-Cola in the United States. It's going to be kind of fun. That's another one that's close to my heart, because out here by UC Davis Medical Center off of Stockton Boulevard is the original Coca-Cola bottling plant here in Sacramento. And I remember driving by there with my dad and him telling me stories about Coca-Cola. I think he might have worked there. I don't know if that plant or maybe back when he lived in Cleveland at some point. So we're going to have him on Monday. So be looking for that show. And again, we're booked pretty good, so we've got some really good stuff coming up that I think you guys are going to love. I think not like, but love. I guarantee you're probably gonna love the stuff I have coming up to pieces. But again, Sherry Coke, yep. But again, if you like the show, share it. If you didn't like the show, share it anyway. And if you can find it in your heart to throw us the donation, that'd be great too. Anyway, I will get that calendar up as soon as I can, and as soon as obviously I'll post it on Facebook so everybody can see it. So I want everybody to have a good few days, and I will see you back here on Monday. Thank you so much for coming.